bottom line with Swift is that he is the Lions' most explosive offensive player. I mean, he's the guy that can win one-on-one, matchups in the open field. And so that's what they're trying to do. You put him on a linebacker. A lot of times that's a matchup that's in the Lions' favor. And so that's really how the Lions have operated. And because they don't have a lot of receivers, you'll see DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams play together sometimes. I mean, two tailbacks essentially on the field at the same time, and that creates some matchup problems as well.
Appreciate you jumping aboard Birds 365. McMullen and McDonald with you. Don't know if they'll call it must-see TV across the nation, but it is here in both Detroit and Philadelphia. The Lion-Eagle Showdown here to give us a Detroit perspective. He's been covering the Lions for over a decade for the Free Press. Did it in the state of Michigan previous to that. So he's been a Lions guy for quite some time. Hall of Fame voter Dave Birkett joins us here on Birds 365. How are you, Dave?
Seen a lot of bad football in my days. How are you guys? Everything good?
Yeah. How you doing, Dave? It's interesting. I'm thrilled to have another Hall of Fame voter. We have Domino on here. Who else we have? Clark Judge.
Gary Myers has been on.
Gary Myers. Yeah, we got all you guys. So thrilled to have you join the program as well. But before we get into some Hall of Fame talk, we got to talk about what's going on this week in Detroit. And that's two bad football teams matching up. But I got a chance to get on Dan Campbell's conference call yesterday. So, one, I give him credit because, coaches don't have to do that these days. By the way, did you guys get Nick Sirianni? Is he doing those things?
Yeah, I didn't do it yesterday. One of my colleagues did, but great for Nick to do it as well.
Yeah. So I give those guys credit when they do it. But we've been talking about moral victories. The Lions have been in a lot of games. Should have beat Minnesota. Maybe should have beat Baltimore with Justin Tucker. What if you can put your finger on one thing, why can't they finish a game?
Talent. I mean, I think that's the bottom line of it, is just that they aren't talented enough right now. I mean, they have a very young roster, very thin roster. They were the beginning of the season when they sort of do the roster analysis, I think they were second youngest in the NFL. That's been a big part of their struggles. The secondary has let them down. They have no deep threats in the passing game. I mean, they are playing hard. You're right. I think people have responded to Dan Campbell. I think he and his staff, made up of a couple of former Eagles assistants too, are doing a pretty good job. Yeah. But they're just from a purely talent perspective, they are near the bottom of the NFL right now, and that's why when they play some of these good teams, they can put a half together, they can play a really strong quarter, but they can't do it for 60 minutes.
Dave, we were just talking about it before you came on, the fact that up until after the Raiders game, when Fletcher Cox kind of got a little perturbed and noted, I don't play screens, and he's not 100% happy with how he's being used in defense coordinator Jonathan Gannon's scheme. The team had stuck behind the coaching staff, and they were still believers, and they did go out and play hard. Not as well. Their roster is not good enough either, much like the Lions, maybe slightly better, but not good enough. But they have stayed with their coach's message. Campbell has done the same. Is this the breaking point for one of these two teams, that whoever comes out on the short end of this score, you're going to start to hear questions about the coach's message and what they're actually doing with their teams, the two newbies on the sidelines for both of these squads?
Yeah, I don't know. Someone had asked me yesterday if they, if Dan's under the hot seat at all, or what would it take? And I don't see him as being on the hot seat at all. And I don't think this is any sort of breaking point for the Lions. I mean, look, everyone wants a win, and they, badly need a win. And eventually they're going to need a few of them, I think, to make sure that Dan's message, hits home and people outside of the organization start believing. But everyone sort of knew, what this season was from the Lions perspective. You trade away, your quarterback, you're adding draft picks, you're building for the future. You look at the roster. Again, it didn't, take a rocket scientist to sort of see where the Lions were at. So disappointing that they're here. And, they had their own little blip against the Bengals when they just didn't play well, and I thought didn't play hard. But, to me, at least from, appearances where I sit, these guys, the organization still appears to be bought firmly into Dan Campbell and his message.
Dave, you bring up that Bengals game. What was interesting to me, and you had talked about the receivers as well. This is the first time all season, maybe the only time all season, I'll go into a game and say, the Eagles probably have better receivers. Not probably, they do. And that we never get to say that here. So I was a little bit interested in Dan kind of called out Jared Goff after that Cincinnati game. Whatever he said, needs to step it up more. I'm paraphrasing, but you probably know the exact quote. What was behind that, especially when doesn't have a lot of people to throw to.
Yeah, well, and he did look. Part of that answer was he said, he was talking about different changes he was making, and he was going to consider everything. And I think the question was, what about Jared? What about your quarterback? And he said, no, Jared's our guy, right? Like, he's our quarterback, but we need more out of him. And so I think there's a little more context there than maybe people realize. And he was 100% right. And look, I think part of the reason why people have responded so well to him is that everything he says and does publicly, that's who he is behind closed doors with the guys, right? When he's calling Jared Goff out in the media, it's not the first time he's done that. He does it in the locker room before he comes and talks to us. And when he's crying on the podium and getting emotional about a last second loss, that's what he's like in the locker room. When he's angry, after the Bengals game, that's what he's like in the locker room. So I think that, his passion and being genuine, that matters a whole lot to people. And as for Jared, look, most people, I think, and maybe the Lions were hopeful that he could be more than a caretaker. They weren't, locked into him long term. But I think most people looked at him when this trade was made and said, all right, that guy he's a placeholder for whoever the Lions are going to draft at quarterback next year, the year after, whenever that happens. So now the Lions, they didn't think Jared Goff they thought he would be a quarterback that could keep them out of this type of situation where they go for whatever because he's a vet, but they haven't surrounded him with much talent.
Dave, you did mention a couple of ex-Eagle guys that are on Dan Campbell's staff, and we want to get to that. But first, another ex-Philadelphia guy, DeAndre Swift, who was a high school star here in town before going to Georgia, and have been actually quite surprised that he is getting the ball via the air as much as he is, because he wasn't a great pass receiver at Georgia. I remember when he came out in the draft, I thought he was unquestionably the top running back. But some people say he doesn't catch the ball coming out of the backfield. He's been real good at that. As a matter of fact, he might be their number one passing weapon. Hockenson as well, but Swift has actually got more balls thrown his way. When did he get over that hump? What made him a better pass receiving running back this year?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, those are their two. It's not receivers. It's a tight end in Hockenson and a running back in Swift, who are Jared Goff's two favorite targets and two most productive receivers. And look, I thought Swift was, I thought he was a good, receiving back coming out of Georgia. I mean, the Lions certainly, the old regime certainly saw him as being that multi-dimensional threat. He did have, you guys may remember, a very first game, I think it was last year, where he dropped a would-be game-winning touchdown, in the end zone. So things haven't been perfect in that regard, but the bottom line with Swift is that he is the Lions' most explosive offensive player. I mean, he's the guy that can win one-on-one, matchups in the open field. And so that's what they're trying to do. You put him on a linebacker. A lot of times that's a matchup that's in the Lions' favor. And so, that's really how the Lions have operated. And because they don't have a lot of receivers, you'll see DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams play together sometimes. I mean, two tailbacks essentially on the field at the same time, and that creates some matchup problems as well.
Dave, Dave Phipp, I got to talk to you about Dave Phipp. Our guy was here for a long time. I think he's one of the best special teams coordinators in this league. He's been that way for a long time. The Lions kind of pulled out the stops against the Rams, who's a very talented football team, understandably so, but really successful. You have the opening drive, onside kick, successfully recovered. Yeah, ironically, the Eagles tried to do that against the Raiders, were unsuccessful. Yeah, but fake punt. Is this desperation, or is this, combination of both? Dave has really got these guys humming on special teams. How has been the overall outlook there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little desperation. You play a Rams team where offensively you can't keep up, so you're doing everything you can to maximize possessions. And two fake punts that they converted and the surprise onside kick last week, they really did everything they could to get the offense, keep the offense on the field. And, Dave Phipp has done a good job. I mean, Dan told the story yesterday. He said, he was with Dave in Miami under Darren Rizzi. Dave was the assistant there, and he just said, assistant special teams, coordinator that is. And Dan said, he sort of, looked at this, bright young guy and kind of knew that, the energy that he had and the way that he taught things, that he would be a good coordinator. And so when he finally got the opportunity last year, he was the first guy on his list. And fortunately for the Lions, it worked out. I think the Lions have done a really good job in special teams this year. They cycled through a whole bunch of kickers in the preseason. They finally found one that has stuck. And obviously they have a really good punter. And so that certainly helps too. But Dave's done a good job scheming some of those things up.
The problem is when you make 3 of those plays, and they made 3 last week, and you don't win the game, well, now it's on tape. The element of a surprise isn't going to be there this weekend against Eagles, but we shall see. I do want to ask you about the quarterback. You gave us a little bit on Goff and his favorite receivers and what he does. He's a bridge quarterback, and everybody knows it, that the Lions are going to go in another direction at some point. We came in here in Philadelphia basically asking the same questions. Jalen Hurts going to be given a chance, but is he the guy going forward? He hasn't quite grasped the job like the brass ring, and I think Goff has done the same in Detroit. How is that playing in the town with the fan base? How do you think it's playing in the locker room?
Yeah, I think it's in the locker room. I think, people certainly like Jared. I mean, again, this is a bunch of, unheralded receivers to begin with, right? And these are guys that have fought for their NFL careers or are scrapping to hold on in some ways. So they've sort of, bonded together. And give Jared credit. I mean, he was a guy that, he led the offseason workouts multiple times. He got, receivers together out in LA where he lives, trying to get this playbook down, before they reported. So he's done some of those leadership things that, that you want to see. But I think it's clear to, I've covered this team now for years or whatever it is, and I think anyone who sort of has watched Jared Goff from the summer till now, fans included, like Matthew Stafford was a different breed of quarterback. And so even though I think the Lions were right to deal Stafford and to sort of start this whole rebuild, fresh and new, like that's the type of quarterback that you need if you're going to succeed long in the NFL. And I think fans, there's not a run Jared Goff jerseys, because I do think that they realize, the lot that he's placed in. But I will say this for him and for the Lions, I think Jared has been.
We lost Dave. Damn, I wanted because I wanted Dave to continue to tell you how good Matthew Stafford is, because I know you don't like Matthew Stafford. But the second part, I wanted to get with Deuce Staley also, and hopefully Dave gets back here. But and Deuce Staley also, and can we pop Dave back up? Yeah, Dave, it's hopefully we got you back.
Sorry about that, guys. Not sure what happened there.
Problem.
Yeah, no problem. It happens. Technical difficulties. But yeah, 2 things. I want you to tell Jody how good Matthew Stafford is, number one. But also, and this is something probably only interesting to me. But you brought up Jack Box, who's probably the best punter in the NFL. Last year in training camp, Aaron Cepas was up there against Jack Box, and he's come to Philadelphia. He's been darn good. I wanted to know, probably nobody's interested in this but me. Did you notice Aaron at all? Did you say, because obviously Jack Box is not going to lose to anybody, but did you notice him at all when he was in Detroit?
Yeah, I think it was a relatively close position battle. I mean, Aaron, if I remember right, contracted COVID at the start of camp, so maybe he came in just a slightly behind Jack. I think Jack had the edge for him, holding some of those things that maybe Aaron hadn't done in the past. And, they both had big legs. Jack didn't really, it was the first 4 games is when Jack just started rocking the ball. I remember there was no preseason last year, so I don't know that we quite knew what the Lions had. Those obviously are done with jugs machines, but I think, going back to last year, it was a pretty close punting battle in the preseason, and that's why they kept Aaron on practice squad to begin with as well. Look, as for Stafford, I've said it for a long time. I mean, Stafford is, he in Detroit, he was good enough to get 3 coaches fired, if that makes sense. Like he wasn't going to win anything in Detroit, certainly not by himself, but he's good enough that no one wants to move on from him, right? Because he's a good player. He's very talented, and some of the things he can do. I mean, we saw it in practice all the time. Back shoulder throw that he would make. His willingness to fit ball tight windows and throw to covered receivers. I mean, those are things that not a lot of quarterbacks can do. So I think you have to appreciate the talent. I do think he was, the Lions didn't win a playoff game in his 12 seasons here, so he was part of that. So to me, he's not, a top 3, 4, 5, whatever quarterback in the NFL, but I do think he's a very good, very talented player.
And he's got talent around him out in LA this year, and he should get that first or second or third playoff win. We'll have to see how it plays itself out. One other guy I wanted to ask you about was Penei Sewell. Last year, leading up to the draft, the Eagles actually were scheduled to pick right in front of the Lions. The Eagles were 6 and the Lions were 7. The Eagles traded down. Miami jumped up, took Waddle, which left Penei Sewell sitting there for the Lions at number 7. Was a guy we talked a lot about. If this guy falls down the board, should the Eagles take him? They're good on the offensive line, but this kid is a special player. How special has he been? Has he shown improvement over the course of the year? I assume that he's going to be their left tackle for years to come, but give us a quick little scouting report on Penei Sewell and his development.
Yeah, no, he's been what people would have expected. Look, for people who don't know, he played right tackle all of training camp, and that's where the Lions had sort of ticketed in to play this season. Taylor Decker, who started the past 5 years at left tackle, was their guy. He hurt his finger right before the first game. Lions flipped Sewell midweek. He played left tackle in college, but he didn't play the 2020 season, and he's been a really good player. I mean, he had 2 blips where he gave up a pair of sacks against the Bengals and the Vikings, but other than that, I think he's been strong. Certainly given the Lions a lot to think about when and if Taylor Decker comes back. That Sewell looks like the future at left tackle, so maybe it's the veteran that they'll have to move to right tackle. I think you'll see Sewell still has some times when he gets a little sloppy with his technique just because he's used to dominating people athletically, but he's 21 years old. He's played 7 games in his career. He's going to be a really good player in time.
Dave, I don't know if you heard the flower talk from Nick Sirianni yesterday, comparing the Eagles to a flower, which did not go over well, as you can imagine, in this particular city. They prefer to have biting kneecaps. The interesting dichotomy in Detroit is Deuce Staley is obviously out there, and a lot of Eagles fans have a lot of love for Deuce Staley. He got to interview at least twice for the Eagles head coaching job. He's out as Dan's assistant head coach, and it seems like Dan really takes that job title seriously. Some people just have it as a title, and Dan Campbell seems to, from the outside, really put some added responsibilities on Deuce Staley. Hopefully that gets him headed in the right track for a head coaching job. Your early thoughts on Deuce Staley and how Dan is sort of mentoring him and trying to get him to that next step.
Yeah, it's tough for us to see exactly what Deuce is doing because so much of it is behind closed doors. But I do think you're right in that Dan sort of came up that assistant head coach route, right? He was never a play caller. He was never a coordinator. He went to New Orleans specifically to learn how to be a head coach, from Sean Payton, and to handle some of those things that, Sean gave him some responsibilities that just to take things off his plate. And Dan has done the same with Deuce. I mean, Deuce talks to us every week, as the assistant head coach. So he's got some media obligations. He puts out fires. I think that's the way that he phrases it sometimes, right before they get to the head coach. Yeah. So he's responsible for some of those small things, I guess, that, maybe you don't understand that come with the head coaching position until you're there. So you're right. Dan and Deuce have both looked at this as just, a spot to groom him to be a head coach one day.
Dave, if you don't mind me asking, who were you working for in 2008?
I was covering the Lions, actually. I was at the suburban chain of papers out here, the Oakland Press, that group, Macomb Daily. There's about 4 suburban papers. So I covered that season. It's my first full season.
Yeah. The reason I asked for our fans here on Birds 365 who don't quite remember, Lion fans remember 2008 because it was 0-16. Eagle fans might not remember that, so that's why I wanted to point it out. Rob Marinelli, Dan Orlovsky started more games at quarterback than anybody. It wasn't a good team. It was as ugly as the record said that it was. Has anyone started to make the comparison yet? Is that a story in Detroit that been there, done that? It was only 13 years ago. Could we actually go without winning a game? Yeah, all right, I'm the bad guy. I'll play bad guy. That's okay. I'll make the comparison. Has anybody brought that up in Detroit?
It's funny, actually. I did a mailbag, answering emails and tweets and whatever a few days ago, and somebody had asked me that question, like, compare this team to the 2008 team, and I said, I like that question. I'm going to turn that into an actual story. Look, I think this team is better than that team, but this team is younger, right? This team had so many rookies. I mean, they have 2 of their 3 cornerbacks are undrafted rookies that are starting, right? I mean, they're playing a lot of young guys in their defensive line rotation. They've got 2 rookies and they've got no receivers. I mean, there's pockets where they don't have talent, right? That team had Kelvin Johnson. That team had a veteran quarterback in John Kitna, who the Lions, I don't want to say constructed an injury, but Kitna could have played through the back injury. They put him on IR early here, and they sort of went young at that position, and that was part of their problems. Different expectations too. 2007 Lions, they went 7-9, and so they came into that season thinking like, wow, maybe we got a shot to make the playoffs here, and that was just an utter disaster. This is a complete different situation where we're at the very beginning of a rebuild. So I don't think, even though people have started to wonder if, well, are we going to go 0-17 and could this be in the cards? I think it's a completely different situation. That rebuild actually started in 2009. That's when they got the number 1 pick of the draft. They took Stafford, and then they went 12 years trying to win and never did.